Caffeinated Thoughts Podcast. Hi, this is Shane Vander Hart. Welcome to another episode. Happy Friday. To close off the week, I had a conversation earlier today with Bobby Schilling, former Congressman Bobby Schilling, who's running for the Republican nomination in Iowa's 2nd Congressional District. Before we get to that conversation, though, first, a word from our sponsor, American Principles Project.
At American Principles Project, we believe that human dignity should be at the heart of public policy. We work in all 50 states and in Washington, D.C. to promote life, religious freedom, local control over education, authentic economic progress for working Americans, and a return to constitutional principles such as federalism. Want to help American Principles Project? Visit our website today, AmericanPrinciplesProject.org. That's American Principles, P-L-E-S, project.org. Sign up for email updates. Help us out. We want to work with you. That's AmericanPrinciplesProject.org.
Without further ado, here's my conversation with Congressman Bobby Schilling. Hey, Bobby, thank you so much for taking time to speak with me on the Caffeinated Thoughts Podcast.
It's good to be here with you today. Appreciate what you do for the conservative movement, Shane. It's awesome.
Very, very welcome. So a question I ask every candidate I speak to, whether they're running for state house or president, is why are you running? I mean, this is you ran for, you obviously served in Illinois, and now you're in Iowa, and you want to run again. So why would you want to do that to yourself, Bobby?
You know, I've had a lot of people ask me, and just to be really forward, you know, just as a U.S. citizen and watching what's happening in Washington, D.C., you know, with the takeovers of, you know, with the Congress, for example, in 2018, we've got all these major extremists that are doing all kinds of things that the Democratic Party of the 60s, 70s, and 80s had no idea that this was coming. John F. Kennedy is turning in his grave today watching what these guys are standing for. I mean, these guys want open borders. They want free health care for illegals. We've got now transgenders who are actually young men who are running against young girls in school sports. I mean, things are way out of control. And here's the thing I believe is that if we don't get control of the House, and if we were to lose the Senate and Donald J. Trump is unelected, in 2 years, Shane, we're not going to recognize this country because these guys are going to have a free-for-all, and they are going to destroy the fabric of this great nation. So I'm stepping into this arena for a couple of reasons, is because I know that I can beat the Democrat in the general election, and I can be a strong supporter for Donald J. Trump, who I believe is going to go down in history as one of the best presidents ever in the U.S.
Okay, a question. There's a question I want to ask you, and I want to circle back to talk about some of the things you just mentioned. First of all, you're going to get asked this. You probably have already been asked this. I know your primary opponent has already accused you of this, but would you consider yourself a carpetbagger?
You know, it's interesting because that's what they pull out of the magic bag to put the shiny silver ball up. But my opponent needs to know this, is that I am technically a third-generation Schilling living in Iowa. My children are now a fourth-generation children living in Iowa. My dad was actually raised in Cedar Falls, Iowa. Grandpa Schilling had a jewelry store in Cedar Falls for 54 years. And, you know, in 2009, they closed up because of the big boxes. But, you know, first off is my opponent would make you think that I came out of Chicago. I come from the Quad Cities, and the Quad Cities area is very similar. The district is really pretty much the same, but I am a Quad Citian living in LeClaire, Iowa, and we're just happy to be here to be able to raise our family in these great Iowa schools and, you know, really just kind of be part of the community.
So you didn't move to Iowa. You didn't build a house in LeClaire because you moved, what, 2015, 2016?
Yeah, so we bought some land. I had a commercial property in Illinois. I did an improvement on it, and at the time the property was assessed at $206,000. Taxes were $6,200. I put $175,000 into the property, and Rock Island County took my property taxes from $6,200 to $19,400. And it was at that moment that Christy and I decided, you know what, we're going to go somewhere where we've got good government and people that are responsible with the tax dollars, unlike Illinois and Chicago. And so we looked around, and the best spot for us to go, we believe, because all of our family and friends are in this area, is right across the river. I live about 6 miles from the house that we lived in Illinois. And it's there was no intent whatsoever to ever run for office. And to be quite forward and with all due respect to the senator there now, is that I've watched this district, for years and years and years. For example, 2008, the senator ran and she lost. In 2010, when, pretty much all of the viable candidates ran across the United States, including myself, that ran, they won. And we've seen time and time again that she just can't pull it off when it really counts, and that's in the general election.
Of course, you're talking about Dr. Marionette Miller Meeks, just for our listeners who may not be aware who your primary opponent is. So, I've watched your career and I've known who you are, but I would venture to say a lot of our listeners probably don't know you. So, you just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So, my wife Christy and I, we've been married for 33 years. We have 10 children, 13 grandchildren. And I like to joke with people and tell them, yes, we do have a TV. But God has truly blessed us. It's just an awesome thing to have a large family and to raise them up in a good, solid Christian home, teaching them right from wrong. And so I actually graduated from Allman High School, which is a Catholic high school in Rock Island, Illinois. From Allman High School, I went to,
I was just saying, I had a roommate at Drake University that went there. Small world. So anyway, go ahead.
I always brag is that the first three playoff teams from Allman High School had one thing in common: they all had a Schilling football player on them. So we're pretty proud of that. But so from Allman, I went to Blackhawk College, and then I attended Blackhawk, and then I went to work for a company called Container Corporation of America. I worked there supporting my family for 5 years. I was a member of the United Paperworkers International Union there. And then while working there, that's actually when I met my wife, Christy. And about a year and a half later, we got married. From Macmillan, I went to Prudential Insurance Company of America. I worked at Prudential for 8 years. I was my last full year with Prudential, I was ranked number 315 out of 13,500 agents. And I was also a member of the UFCW there, which is the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, which a lot of people don't know that some of the insurance companies have a union. And then while in the financial services industry, I had this grandiose idea of opening up a pizza store. My family's always been in restaurant, and my wife agreed that I could under one condition, and that she got to name it. And so I came home from work one day and she goes, "Hey, I've got the name." I said, "Great." I'm thinking Bobby's Pizza or Schilling's Place. And she says, "St. Giuseppe's Heavenly Pizza." And I was like, oh my gosh, they'll never find us in the phone book. But we're the only pizza store in the Quad City area that's closed on Sunday. And it's not only because that's what we're supposed to do, but it gives all of our employees and our families that day off to have some good, solid family time. In 2008, Barack Obama was running for president, and it was the day after the election when our kids came into the room and asked who won, and we told them that Barack Obama had won. And my daughter Rachel, I looked over at her and she had tears streaming down from her eyes, and I just looked at her. I said, "What's wrong, baby?" And she says, "Dad, who's going to protect the unborn?" And they went to school that day, and I looked at my wife Christy and I said, "Babe," I said, "You know what?" I said, "We've got to do something. We've got to engage this process." So for several weeks, I did a lot of praying and discerning, and talking to people, every time they came into the store. And I came home one day and I said to my wife, I said, you know what, I've got it figured out. And I said, I'm going to run against Phil Hare. And she looked at me like I was half crazy. And she says, oh, my goodness, that's the United States House of Representatives. And, the rest is history. This is a seat that had been held by the Democrats for 28 years. The last person to run against Phil Hare was a gal by the name of Andrea Zinga. She was a newscaster, very famous in the area. She got beat by 30,000 votes. We took that exact same Democrat incumbent on, and we beat him by 20,000 votes, which means that we shifted 50,000 votes from the Democratic side over to our side. And, we're pretty proud of what we did, and I can get into all the accomplishments that I had while I was in D.C., but we need somebody that's going to actually be a representative of the people, what I consider as a citizen legislator, not somebody that's a stepper, meaning, you run for a seat, you step to the next one, you step to the next one. I'm going in to serve people, and that's why I'm in this race.
Okay, so when you were talking about why you wanted to run, you brought up some issues, specifically, the transgender issue came to mind. We don't hear candidates talking about this. Why do you think that is?
I think a lot of people are afraid to talk about it, but this is something that needs to be addressed. I mean, I don't know who out there thinks that it's fair that a young man can run in a track meet or any sport against my daughter and take away scholarships and things like that. I mean, look, I love every human being on this earth, but and some people, you can do what you wish, but I mean, at some point you've got to draw a line in the sand and say, hey, you know what, enough's enough. This is getting a little bit carried away, and it's not fair. I mean, I want to know where the women's movement is on this, because they should be all over this.
Yeah, it seems like there's when it comes to transgender, you definitely have some strange bedfellows. You got social conservatives who are pushing back against it, as well as second wave feminists who are saying, "Hey, no, this isn't right." So, anyways, yeah, interesting, and I wish more candidates would run on this issue, because I think it's vitally important. But let me ask you this. We seem to have compelling liberty interests when it comes to the LGBT community, as well as those who are religious, Christians in particular. Those liberty interests tend to butt up against each other with accommodation laws and things like that. How do you think we can navigate that? How could Congress navigate that in a way that's fair to everybody?
I think there has to be, as I call it, the lines drawn in the sand. I think that as Americans, we can live our own lives, but I think that when, people are being adversely affected and things aren't fair to them, I think we need to lay down markers, whether it's a transgender man running in, playing a sport that a girl's in, or if it's a parent that's saying, hey, my 4-year-old son, we think is, opposite sex, and we're going to have some surgery performed on him. I think that should be considered child abuse. There just has to be some common sense things. And look, Shane, I have friends that are gay, and I don't care. They're my friends. I love them just the same as I do my other friends. But, a lot of the folks out there understand that, oh, hey, wait a minute, this is wrong. So this is the extremist side of things that are kind of pushing an agenda through and indoctrinating, the young minds of Americans. I mean, you've even got them going now into libraries and reading to children. I think that if the libraries are going to allow for this, then you know what, maybe we're to the point to where there needs to be age restrictions on going into libraries, because apparently, people that are, they've had a guy that was, showing his private areas to little kids just I think last week or so.
Yeah, we reported on that. Yep.
Oh, you did? Yeah.
Yep.
It's like, come on. this is ridiculous what they're trying to do. And what better way? This all boils down to a few things: is that the communist, socialist folks out there, they understand that if you can destroy the family, if you can destroy the church, that it's, just like what they said years ago, we don't even have to fire one single bullet. And I think it's time for Americans, and not even conservatives necessarily, but just Americans need to stand up against this, and we all need to work together to try to put the family back together. So many broken homes and kids without two-parent families, and they're kind of left out on their own sometimes, raising themselves and things like that, where you got to have the two parents in there to kind of guide them along and turn them into great, productive citizens.
And, okay, I want to piggyback on that because, again, you're bringing up things that you don't hear the Republican Party talking about generally, with the exception, I know, Santorum campaigned on some of these things. How, from a policy perspective, how do we address strengthening the family? What are some policy proposals you have in mind you think are things that are worth pursuing in order to strengthen the family? Because what we tend to get from the Republican Party is a lot on tax cuts, and which is great. I'm all in favor of tax cuts, but pro business. I'm not anti business, but we also have seen businesses haven't necessarily been social conservatives' friends, at least big business anyway, when it comes to religious liberty and things like that. So anyway, I'll shut up and let you answer.
So I think that something that's important there is that, instead of penalizing folks that are married, that, some call it the marriage penalty tax, things like that. But I think that what we've got to do is incentivize people to have more children and give them a tax break when they do, and give it to them up front. And then, there's a lot of different ideas that are out there to help people unify, the family and make it a little bit more popular, I guess. Today, there's a lot of folks that, they don't want to get married right away, which is fine. But, at our house, we teach our kids that, once you find that right person, it's okay if you guys, if you're getting along and things like that, is to go ahead and get, my one daughter who's married to a young gentleman serving in the Army now. He goes back and forth to Afghanistan, but she was only 18 when she got married. And I'm not saying that everybody should get married at 18 whatsoever, but we knew this young man since he was 4 years old. And, we thought when he called me up and asked for my daughter's hand in marriage, normally I'd be like, hey, wait a minute. But I knew this guy, I knew his heart, I knew his family. And, I thought that was an okay thing. They've got their third child now, and everything's working out great. But I think as a community, we all have to work together to try to strengthen the family, strengthen marriage. And, when you go to a wedding, and we go to witness that, one of the things that we say, at that wedding is that we're going to be there for that married couple and help them through the rough times and things like that. And, I think it's just more people engaging, especially the folks that don't like what's going on in our country now.
Okay. I want to shift gears here. We're looking, the House has had, President Trump signed the U.S. MCA deal it's almost been a year ago, if not a year. Why do you think the House has not approved it yet? It's already passed in the Senate. We're waiting on the House.
Yeah, I believe that this is just politics. It is basically, they know in the House that if they don't pass the USMCA, that it hurts the Midwest and other states that strongly supported Donald J. Trump for president. And this is their way to try to put a hurt on the American farmer and manufacturers throughout. A lot of these people, like I said, the American farmers overwhelmingly supported Donald J. Trump because they knew he was going to, give us some fair and free trade agreements out there. Here's the thing I like about Trump is that, pretty much every promise that he made to the American people, he has kept. And if you think about, past presidential races, we had Democrats and Republicans constantly campaigning on, when I get in there, I'm going to go after these free trade agreements. And nobody ever had the guts to do it except for Trump, especially with what's going on in China and elsewhere. So I think it's a political move where these guys are trying to overturn the 2016 election, and they want to make darn sure that the people that really helped elect Donald J. Trump pay a political price in the form of holding up good trade agreements that are ready to go. Just bring it to the floor. And you can't tell me, look, I've been out there before. If they could, Nancy Pelosi, when they get back in session next week, she could bring that thing to the House floor and pass that thing through, and it'd be a done deal. And everybody in the United States of America, our economy. But it's kind of a sad day to hold something like that hostage for political gain. And I think it's just wrong for any party, whether it's Democrat or Republican, to do that.
Okay. Shifting gears, you're obviously, I could probably guess what your position is on the impeachment inquiry.
Yeah.
So maybe I just
don't get me started, man.
Okay. Well, I have mixed feelings, and I'm probably not totally aligned with you. I don't necessarily want to debate, but I maybe want to just pick your brain a little bit. When there's obviously debate about whether there was quid pro quo with the investigation, holding up military funds for an investigation into Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. Let me ask you this. Had that taken place, if there actually was quid pro quo, and I know that hasn't necessarily been proven, is that okay for the president to do?
I think that I don't think anything should be held up to before you give money to any country. But I do believe that any president, being Democrat or Republican, if you believe that there was some corruption that had happened, like what has happened, what we believe to have had happened with the Biden family and others, I think it is the duty of the United States of America and the leadership to go and find out exactly what happened. I mean, you've got a guy making $50,000 a month who
right.
had no clue as to what he was doing. So, but I don't think that any president should, withhold funds, unless they get the answers that they're looking for or questions answered. I don't think that is right. We're either going to be with them and helping them out, or we're not. But nothing should be held over someone's head.
Okay. So if the Democrats were able to prove that there was quid pro quo for, holding up military aid in order to investigate Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, would you think that's something that's impeachable?
I don't know if that would be impeachable. From what I've read and studied so far, and even in the document that I read from the call, I just really don't trust the opposition side and what's coming up front. For example, you don't have hearings in the skip room and then hold certain people out of the skip. I mean, I think that this that's what makes our country great, is to have, open hearings. And I know you've got leakers and things like that, but I don't believe that happened. If it did happen, then we do have to take a good hard look at it and weigh it out. But I think that for the last, I knew when Trump was going after what he calls the fake news and others, that he was going to have some issues and they were going to work heavily against him. But on whether he put that out in front, I guess I don't want to put something out there until we get like all the facts on what he actually did, because it's kind of like I feel like I'm playing into the Democratic hand, and I just don't trust these guys. If you look at Adam Schiff getting out on the stands, lying under oath and everything, it just right now, I think that once Barr gets done with his stuff and then we've got a lot more of the information, then I would say, yay or nay and make a decision once that's all out in the front.
Well, at least now there's going to be public hearings, and one thing I guess I was upset to see with the impeachment inquiry resolution that passed was that the Republicans have to go to the House Intelligence Chair and the Judiciary Committee Chair and say, "Mother, may I?" when it comes to issuing subpoenas for witnesses. I just think that's obviously goes against precedent that was set, in the Clinton impeachment, as well as the Nixon impeachment, had that actually process gone through.
Yeah, and I think that the American people really just need to know. I mean, when you got these meetings going on, and then people that are asking questions, of witnesses, and then they're being told by Adam Schiff and others that, hey, don't answer that question. Why not? I mean, it's got to be a fair thing. And I would say the same thing if this were the opposite way, Shane. If this were the Republicans acting in this way, I would say, hey, you know what? No, that's wrong, and they should be letting them answer the questions.
And that's kind of how I've approached a lot of this, a lot of things that's happened in the Trump administration, and when it happened when stuff would come up in the Obama administration with each side. How would you respond, act, feel if the roles were reversed? Would this be okay if it was your team or not? And hopefully, if a person's consistent, they would say no, it's not okay. So. Yeah. Good deal.
I mean, and that's what I think it's really important, and I think at some point we have to take the DNR away from our names, and that's kind of what you're saying, I feel, is that, and just as an American, what's right and what's wrong, and it's usually pretty black and white, I think.
Yeah. So, looking into Syria, what's going on in Syria and what happened with President Trump ordering, I think it was, 50 to 100 troops out of northeast Syria to make way for Turkey coming in. How should the United States support the Kurds? What should pressure be applied to Turkey, if any? Did President Trump handle that situation properly, or could something different have been done?
We can always do the Monday morning quarterback, but I think that we handled it properly. We can always do it better after we review things, but I'm kind of unique when it comes to the Republican side, because I look at, all of these wars and how much they're costing us, and the lives, and God bless the families who have lost a loved one with these wars. But, there has to come a point in a time. So I was fortunate, when you're in Congress, you get to do what they call Code Ls, and that's where you take a trip somewhere, and a lot of members of Congress will go to, nice places, some go to Hawaii, what have you. And I got to pick, and I chose to go to Afghanistan because I wanted to go there and see firsthand what was going on, what their military looked like, sit down and have lunch with our men and women and just tell them, that we love them and, we're praying for them back at home. And, we hope they get home to their families soon. But, at some point, Shane, I believe that we've got to take a really hard look and say, why the heck are we here? I mean, if you look at September 11, 2001, the bulk of the taking care of business by our military was done within 12 months.
Right.
And we've just seen so much go on. And, what some people have to understand, and I think most do out there, is that, you have to go over and stand a country up. One of the most important things that has to be there is called the rule of law. And if they don't have that and they're run by corrupt politicians, it's pretty difficult to help them stand up. And I think that Donald J. Trump is, I believe, I support, he's talking about getting our men and women out of there, getting them home. First, we don't have the money to do it. And, we just can't afford to stay places while we're running up all these massive, deficits and debt for future generations. So I'm not in line with the way Barack Obama did it when, he said, hey, Tuesday the 15th at 3:00, we're pulling our people out. I think that has to be done in secret. And then we just start to draw down our troops and get these people back home to defend America here at home.
Okay, so as far as our future approach when it comes to the war on terror, what do you think? What kind of military standing should we have in the Middle East? Should any troops remain, or should we just have bases open and agreements with the host countries to send in special operations teams when needed?
Yeah, I think that if it's going to really have an adverse effect on the United States safety, because the number one job of our government is to protect the American people. But at the same time, if there's some humanitarian things that are really bad, we just can't afford to police the whole world. But at the same time, it's kind of a fine line. If you got people over there that are slaughtering people because they're Christian or whatever, we need to, let our voice be heard. And then I think a lot of stuff we try to do diplomatically and try to avoid sending our men and women in harm's way. We've got to have some good negotiators that are willing to go in there and say, hey, you guys need to knock this off. But, if somebody comes in here and they take down, like what they did to us is September the 11th, I think we have to react. Otherwise, what happens is, they will continue to do more and more of this. And that was one of the things I studied pretty hard when I was in office is, the fear was that they would start coming here, and start, doing more and more of this stuff. And, the thing is that with these terrorist cells, these guys are plotters and planners, and, they don't strike, right away. You don't know when they're going to do it. But at all times, they're plotting and planning because they hate everything that this country stands for. So I think it's a really important thing is to try to take care of things diplomatically, if possible. But if it's something that is going to adversely affect this great nation, then we've got to take it head on. And that's the thing that, I believe that, we have to be a country that has a very strong military, and that our men and women are equipped with the proper tools. And then, it's walk softly but carry a big stick.
Okay.
And just let them know if you mess with us, it's game on. So don't mess with us, basically.
Right. Something I've been thinking about for a number of years now, and I just wanted to ask you: do you think it's time to revisit the War Powers Act?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do. We've got a lot of different things that we could do to to dig into that, but just kind of things are ever changing. So I think with anything like that, we should always just kind of take a look at it and just make sure that we're up to date, because as everybody knows, things from years ago, even 10 years ago, have changed drastically. So I think it's always a good idea to just it's kind of like almost like a business plan. You don't keep that same business plan for 20 or 30 years. You go in and look at it and, hey, let's fix this, and this. So.
Right. Well, just with Iraq and with Afghanistan, and even with sending troops into Syria, and this is a bipartisan issue, obviously not because President Obama did this as well. These long-term troop engagements and military action without any formal declaration of war. Obviously, the commander-in-chief has got to have flexibility to respond to immediate needs. When obviously, we shouldn't expect a formal declaration of war when we're sending a special operations team in to deal with a terrorist cell. But long-term engagements. Do you think it's time for Congress to
because they haven't declared war since World War II. Uh,
Yeah.
is it time to give that power back to the legislative branch?
Well, and I really think that it is, whether it's a Democrat in the White House or
Right.
a Republican, because here's the thing I believe is that, there's 435 members of the House of Representatives and then 100 in the Senate. But the thing is the people send an individual, voice from each and every district, and they want that voice heard. And by not giving that voice, they're just kind of shutting down the people. But I agree with you is that the president should be able to respond quickly, and I know that, for example, Nancy Pelosi was really upset when they went after Baghdadi. And, the thing is I was with him on that because they leaked so much out. Baghdadi probably would have not been at the spot that they thought he was going to be at, or we would have lost American lives. So when you've got people there you can't trust and they're leakers, you've got to do exactly what Donald J. Trump did.
Right. So, okay, I want to shift gears. I'd be remiss not to talk to you about the life issue. Again, this seems to be an issue that it's usually on the periphery. We see a lot of politicians, even Republican politicians, might give it lip service, but they don't necessarily campaign on it. What kind of legislation would you back? What would you like to see pushed through the House if the Republicans win back the majority in the House?
What I would like to do, first thing I would like to do, and I know this is going to probably put a lot of money against me in a general election, but I really don't care. I want to completely defund Planned Parenthood. Not one tax dollar should go to people that are killing innocent children. And I think that $500 million should actually go over to true healthcare facilities that are doing pretty much the same thing, but including mammograms and other things, but aren't killing babies. I think it's really important that when a mother comes in, that they should not only have just that one choice. I think it's really important that when a woman comes to a healthcare clinic, and if you notice, most of these Planned Parenthood are all in the lower income, not all of them, but the bulk of them are all in the lower income communities. And I think it's really sad because, a lot of these moms come in, they're desperate, and then the only option that basically is laid upon the table to them is, hey, you know what, we can take care of this for you next week at 2:00. I think there needs to be an alternative of, you know what, we can, as a community, we can help you, we can support you, or, the as my wife calls it, is climbing on that cross with Christ, is you could give this baby up for adoption if you chose, but at least give them some good, solid options rather than just the one. But I think the funding needs to go to companies out there that, the Women's Choice Center right here in the Bettendorf Quad Cities, they bring people in, they do sonograms, they help them, and they try to steer them, to giving that baby life. And some of them they help, to keep the baby, and some go the other way. But those are the places that need to be funded, because I know, several folks that have had abortions, and, they go through a lot of pain, and these are good women, and they deal with this. Luana Stoltenberg, she's here in the Quad Cities, a big supporter of mine, but, she had abortions herself and went through some really difficult times. And, the hurt and the pain that she talks about that she went through is just amazing. And I think that the key thing also on this issue is that, if anybody out there knows a woman that maybe had an abortion, we got to love those people and bring them in and not, have them feel, like they're, isolated or anything like that, and not judge them. Just love them back into the church and other things, and just be there for them, and know that, hey, we all do some things that we're not proud of. But my big thing is I want to do that. I definitely support the heartbeat bill. I think that at conception, that is a life. The only thing that is missing is a thing called time. All of our DNA is there. Embryology even says, look, it's all about time. That baby is there. And really the difference between you and I, or anybody out there listening, is for us, I'm 55 going on 56. I was what they call a blob of tissue. Now with all of the technology today, we realize, oh my goodness, at 7 days old, it's got a beating heart, and it's just, technology has really changed. And I think that the more these people get to see what's actually there versus what was sold. But a bigger thing yet, I think that the folks need to understand, especially in some of the communities that are really being pushed to have abortion, is to understand Planned Parenthood and to understand Margaret Sanger and what her main thing was, and that was to create a supreme race. And that's important to know, because that was taken out, some of the weakest amongst us, if your skin color wasn't the right color, things like that. And look, we're all Americans. To me, it doesn't matter color of skin, if you're a boy, a girl, what have you. It's all about just, doing the right thing and giving every child the opportunity, because I believe that a baby was created in God's image, and he planned us a long time ago. And I'm very firm on the life issue, and I believe that it's really important is just understanding that that's a baby. It's not a blob of tissue. And and people say, well, what about the right to choose? And the question back to them is, the right to choose what?
Right.
So you're going to either choose to let your baby live, or you're going to have the doctor kill it. If it's got a beating heart, it is alive. And that's something that I think that we need to do is kind of bring that out and explain that a little bit better, so that people think, oh my goodness. That's why the sonograms are so very, very important when a woman goes in to a Planned Parenthood or wherever, is that they can see that baby moving around, jumping, and the heart beating, and the fingers moving.
Ultrasounds.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. I don't know how much time you have. I want to just move on real quick to another topic here. The national debt. Nobody seems to be talking about it, except, like, say, Mark Sanford seems to be the only presidential candidate even bringing it up. It continues to grow even under Republican administrations. Unfortunately, even under the Trump administrations, it's grown considerably. How do we address the national debt? What needs to be done to cut back our budget and make sure that we're balancing our budget and we start paying this off? Because eventually we're gonna we can't just print our way out of the money out of this. The bill's gonna eventually come due, and I'm concerned about my children and my grandchildren when that happens.
Yeah, and you're right. That's something that really nobody's talking a whole heck of a lot. I believe that our national debt, Shane, is the greatest threat to America. And this is something to where there's no one silver bullet, so to speak. So when I was in office, as I talked to different agencies and that they a lot of the fiscal conservatives that are at these agencies would say, hey, Bobby, you know what? We get $20 million a year for our budget. But what happens is if we don't spend all of that money, next year our budget gets cut by that amount. So what we do is we incentivize them to just completely waste whatever's left over. One example I have that is a real story is that a school district had several $1 million left over, and what they went and did with the extra money so they wouldn't lose it in next year's budget is they went out and they purchased a ton of school furniture and things like that. And then they're like, okay, now what do we do with it? So then they went and they rented a storage facility to put it all in there. That's ridiculous. That's something that could save us, I'm sure billions and billions of dollars just with that one little thing. I came up with an idea. It was called SOS, Saving versus Overspending. And what it did was it incentivized these agencies to not spend that money. And then what we would do is we would let them keep whatever they saved, half of that they would be able to keep, and then use that for whatever their needs were, and then return the other half back to the government. And then the next year the budget would get cut by that amount rather than the full thing. And then if they had a big expenditure coming up, they would have to come in and get approval. There's a guy by the name of Adam Andrzejewski. He came out with a program. It was called Every Dime Online in Real Time. And I mean, I know this, because, our economy is so vast and there's so many different agencies and cities and government, going on. But basically what would be really awesome is if we could figure out a way, and I know there's a way to do it, you just got to have the right setup. And I'm trying to talk with him about his idea, but basically what it does is it shows every penny. And some of the cities and counties in Illinois have actually put this thing into play. And what's nice about it is there's accountability for every penny spent, and you can see it, so when you have people in an agency that are out using the credit card to go buy groceries for their family instead of using it for a business expense, you can capture that and see it and know it's there. The other thing is, with the military torn down as much as it was under Barack Obama, we had to build it back up because, a lot of our ships, planes, and that are, way, way outdated. And so, militarily, we did need to increase the spending to replenish what had been torn down by the Obama administration. With that said, I think it's very, very important with military spending that we get rid of the buddy system. And what I mean by that, Shane, is that, you have these guys and they're friends with this guy, and next thing you know, they're selling us a $20,000 toilet. That
right.
stuff, I think when people are doing that, if you love America, why are you trying to gouge us and stick it to the taxpayer? Our military spending, some of the stuff that they spend, when you look at the cost of some of this stuff, there's no way we should be spending the type of money. So I think that's where the private sector comes in, and they're able to produce things and create more competition because competition draws down prices, and these guys that, what they do is they'll build, some type of military equipment, and we pay them for putting that all together. And then once they get it all figured out, then they sell it to us for unbelievable amounts of money. If they want to figure something out, it's like you or I, if we're going to, invent something, nobody's going to fund us and put us, in there, give us millions and millions of dollars or billions of dollars, whatever. We've got to figure it out and then bring the idea in and then sell it. And
right.
I think the competition thing is a big deal when it comes to military spending.
Yeah, definitely. So just, big part of spending too. I mean, obviously the discretionary spending is really a small piece of the pie when you consider the whole federal budget, and a big part of that is actually entitlement spending. How do you address, how do we address Social Security? How do we bring, make sure it's going to be solvent?
Yeah, that's a tough one. There's a lot of different ideas that have floated around. One that I've heard that was floated is increase the age by a couple of years. That would help. Allow people, you got to be careful when you put this out there because it's, they turn it into a hit piece. But, if my kids want to let the government, invest their money, that's fine, and they can earn 0.00001% on their money or less, probably losing money,
right.
Or let them go to the market with it and see if that works. I mean, there's no silver bullet on that one either. But
Right.
I think that this is where it's important that, this is what's bad about, the political atmosphere that's been created over the years, is because it used to be where both parties would come together and say, hey, you know what, here's a great idea. What do you think about this? And then they kind of work together to come with a solution. And as a business person, I mean, if you're in business and you're not figuring out solutions to problems, you're out of business. And that's the direction we're headed with, Medicare, Social Security. It's one of those things to where if we don't get this under control, and the big thing is and I think we're starting to see a little bit of that now, is now that Trump has really turned the economy around by pulling all this overregulation and giving some certainty to businesses across the United States, now people are getting more jobs. I mean, for the employer today, and speaking as an employer, it's really hard to find employees now. So I think something that we've got to do is we've got to incentivize more people that are able bodies to get in there and get back into the productive members being in our society. And there's going to be people that can't work. We understand that, and I think we have an obligation to take care of those. But the government is literally incentivizing people not to work. You can make more money staying home, working for a little bit of cash, things like that. But I think that that's something that we've got to figure out, is the able bodies. If you're on the system, I don't know if it's a work fair, if you're getting free money from the taxpayer, because nothing's free, is that, we're going to clean parks. You got to make people uncomfortable to where they're like, you know what, I'm going to go get a real job. We're incentivizing that. And I think we've got to figure out a way to take care of that, because then you've got more people paying into the system. One of the things I worked on, I know I talk a lot. I had a cup of coffee earlier.
Hey, I understand. Caffeinated thoughts are the best.
Yeah. But one of the things I came up with, so I think something that really needs to be hit on hard also in the current Congress and the Congress after that, is the opioid and drug crisis that's going on in this country. And I think that needs to be addressed hard. And I think that people that are actually feeding folks, I mean, if you look at how many people died from 1999 into 2017, the numbers that OD'd from opioid crisis is just unbelievable. So there's a couple of things. So I had a friend, and this is a real life story. I had a friend, his name was Tony, great guy, basketball stud, just awesome. Well, him and his wife were both addicts. They ended up getting divorced, and then Tony ended up getting cleaned up, and he was getting assistance from the government. And what happened was he went out and he goes, Bobby, I got a job. And Tony was feeling really good about things. So he got a job at a rental center, and he was making $1,000 a month. So what happened was his assistance that he was getting, and this is more of a state issue thing, but the assistance that he was getting was $2,000 a month, and he was getting, free health care for the kids, and everything was pretty much taken care of. But as soon as he got that job making $1,000 a month, all of that assistance was pulled away. And I think that we need to figure out a way to, instead of having an all or nothing, Tony should have gotten, say, $1,500 a month plus his $1,000, because now he's making $2,500 versus $2,000, but he's actually working, which in turn, would save the taxpayer $500 per month. But here's the bigger picture, and this is where the humanity comes into it, is now Tony is working. Tony feels a lot better about himself. And guess what Tony's kids see? They see Dad going to work. And guess who they want to be like? They want to be like Dad. Well,
right.
Sad to say, Tony couldn't get it turned around. Tony went back into active addiction. And about 6 years later, Tony died at the age of like 58 or 57 or 58. But had Tony had that opportunity, I believe today he'd still be alive. His kids would have a dad, and I'm sure now they're probably grown and on their own. But, it's about kind of thinking outside the box, Shane. and coming up with ideas that are going to really help people feel better about their daily lives. And it's just, a lot of it is about the family, I believe, is getting that family nucleus, put together, because there's people out there that are hoping and praying that it's torn apart. They want to rip the church apart. And that's what makes America strong, is the American family, the hardworking folks out there, and the church. And I think if we can get back to that, we can fix a lot of things in this country.
Okay, and I'm going to have you back on, because we're almost approaching an hour, and we haven't talked about health care or immigration or anything like that.
Yeah, and I've got some really good ideas on all that. So
I'll have to have
awesome,
you.
man.
I'll have to have you back, but I want to respect your time. Thank you so much for coming on, and God bless you, and we'll be obviously keeping an eye on this primary and the general election and all that. So I'll be in touch to have you back on to discuss some of these other issues.
Sounds great, man. Appreciate your time, brother.
You're very welcome. Take care.
That concludes today's episode of the Caffeinated Thoughts Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you happen to be listening to this podcast somewhere other than on our website, please make sure to check out caffeinatedthoughts.com. Again, that's caffeinatedthoughts.com, or just Google us at Caffeinated Thoughts, and we'll show up at the top of your search screen. Also, be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, sign up for our emails. That way you don't miss a single update. If you can also catch this podcast, using a variety of different podcast apps. We're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Google Play, we're on Stitcher, we're on Spotify, we're on Podbean. Who am I missing? Well, if I'm missing anybody, just drop me a line, Shane at caffeinatedthoughts.com, and we'll be sure to see if we can get our podcast added to that as well. So, until next time, my friends, this is Shane Vander Hart. Take care. Have a great weekend.